She stood barefoot on the cold mosaic floor, where scenes of gods and conquered nations slept beneath her skin. Rome breathed around her like a living creature, slow and immense, exhaling smoke, desire, and fear. Oil lamps flickered, painting her shadow tall and distorted against the marble, as if another woman watched from the wall. The air was heavy with myrrh and crushed roses, with the metallic hint of something unsaid. Outside the curtained windows, a messenger ran through the dark streets, carrying news that would end one life and elevate another. Inside, she waited. She had learned that waiting was power. Tonight, an emperor would come, not as a ruler, but as a man seeking forgetfulness. She would give him more than warmth. She would give him illusion, and in return, she would take a fragment of Rome itself. Every step echoing closer tightened the invisible thread that bound her fate to the empire's pulse. Desire was never innocent here. It was a weapon wrapped in silk, and she was its most careful bearer. By dawn, the Palatine Hill shimmered beneath a pale sky, its temples and villas rising like frozen waves of power. Livia wrapped her stola tighter as servants moved silently around her, adjusting pins, smoothing fabric, erasing any sign of the night. She had been born far from these heights, in a modest household where women learned obedience before speech. Rome had taught her a different lesson, that survival belonged to those who understood men better than they understood themselves. Her beauty was spoken of in careful tones, not striking, not theatrical, but persistent, the kind that lingered in memory and returned uninvited. Dark eyes, observant and patient, hands that never trembled. In the world she inhabited, wives represented alliances and lineage, mistresses represented truth. It was with women like her that emperors confessed doubt, fear, and hunger. In shaded gardens and perfumed chambers, decisions were softened, delayed, sometimes redirected. Livia listened as men unburdened themselves, mistaking her silence for devotion. She learned which names caused a tightening of the jaw, which provinces drained the treasury, which heirs inspired more anxiety than pride. None of this knowledge was written. All of it was lethal. The bathhouses were her first classroom. Steam blurred rank and reputation, and bodies revealed what mouths would not. She learned to read scars, to notice which men avoided their reflections, which lingered too long beside younger rivals. A touch placed just short of promise could unbalance a senator more effectively than accusation. A smile withdrawn at the right moment could create obsession. Desire in Rome was not about pleasure alone, it was about imbalance, about creating a need that could be satisfied only through access, favors, protection. Yet danger was constant. Other women watched her with sharpened curiosity, wives guarding their positions, rivals counting her appearances, slaves noting her comings and goings. A single rumor could turn into exile. A misplaced trust could end in poison diluted with honey. Livia never drank without watching the cup poured. She never slept without knowing the exits. Power demanded vigilance. When the emperor noticed her, it happened without ceremony. No declaration, no gift, only a pause in conversation, a longer look, an invitation phrased as indifference. He spoke to her not as to an ornament, but as to a space where he could lay down the weight of rule. In his presence, she felt the heat of restrained violence, the loneliness of absolute authority. She understood immediately, to be chosen was to be seen, and to be seen was to be endangered. Every night that followed drew her deeper into a web where desire and governance entwined. She wondered not if she would fall, but when Rome would decide the price of her influence and whether she would be ready to pay it. The nights that followed unfolded like a quiet war. Livia learned that proximity to power altered time itself. Hours stretched, moments sharpened, and every gesture acquired consequence. She was summoned without pattern, sometimes at dusk, sometimes long after midnight, never twice the same way. The emperor did not speak of love. He spoke of pressure, of borders that would not hold, of men who smiled too readily. In those hours she became neither comfort nor ornament, but a mirror in which he studied his own uncertainty. She answered carefully, shaping responses that sounded like intuition rather than counsel. It was safer to be believed instinctive than intelligent. Other women noticed. They always did. In the colonnaded gardens, glances lingered longer. At feasts, conversations paused when she entered, then resumed with altered tones. One evening, a senator's wife brushed past her, whispering a name that did not belong to her, an accusation wrapped as mistake. Livia smiled and said nothing. Silence, she knew, traveled farther than defense. Still, she felt the tightening net of attention. In Rome, visibility was a currency that depreciated quickly. She sought allies where others saw servants, a hairdresser who heard everything, a cupbearer whose loyalty was purchased not with coins, but with protection. From them she learned which women paid priests for charms, which men bribed astrologers, which corridors echoed after midnight. Knowledge accumulated like a second skin. Each fragment made her safer and yet more dangerous. She sensed that the city itself was beginning to lean toward her, curious and resentful in equal measure. The emperor's rivals tested her without naming the test. A gift arrived, rare pearls, too generous to be innocent. She returned it untouched, sending thanks through an intermediary. A message followed, inviting her to a gathering she knew would be watched. She declined with illness that did not exist. Each refusal narrowed her path. Acceptance risked scandal. Refusal bred suspicion. She wondered which choice would be counted against her first. One night, as rain softened the city's edges, the emperor confessed a plan he had not shared with his council. He watched her face as he spoke, measuring reaction. She felt the weight of it settle in her chest. To know such things was to be implicated. She answered with a question instead of an opinion, guiding him back to his own reasoning. He smiled, faintly, and for the first time she saw gratitude flicker through his restraint. It frightened her more than anger would have. Gratitude created attachment, and attachment invited removal. Rumors reached her of a woman from the East, newly arrived, praised for her daring beauty. The court adored novelty. Livia prepared as she always did, by learning, by waiting. Yet in the quiet before sleep, she wondered if patience would be enough this time, or if Rome was already preparing to replace her, as it replaced everything that lingered too long. The woman from the East arrived like a deliberate disturbance. Her name was Callista, and it traveled ahead of her, wrapped in admiration and warning. She wore color differently than Roman women, favoring deep blues and gold-threaded veils that suggested mystery rather than modesty. Where Livia practiced restraint, Callista performed confidence. Courtiers leaned closer when she spoke, eager to be seen noticing her. Livia observed from a distance, marking how quickly novelty rearranged loyalties. Rome, she knew, loved what unsettled it. The emperor noticed Callista as others had predicted, but not with the hunger they expected. He studied her as one studies a puzzle, intrigued but cautious. Livia sensed the shift immediately, not a loss of favor, but a division of attention. Power rarely abandoned, it redistributed. Invitations changed, conversations shortened. The space she had occupied alone now echoed with absence. She reminded herself that panic was a luxury, adaptation was survival. Callista sought her out with calculated politeness. Their meeting took place in a garden heavy with late summer figs, the air sweet and almost cloying. Compliments were exchanged like ceremonial blades, each sharp beneath the surface. Callista spoke of foreign courts, of women who ruled through spectacle and fear. Livia listened, understanding the message. There were many ways to command desire. When Callista asked how one survived Rome, Livia answered truthfully, by never forgetting that it survives you. The smile that followed was neither friendly nor hostile. It was interested. Pressure increased. A senator once loyal to Livia's quiet influence began to avoid her gaze. Another tested her with careless remarks, seeing if she would react. She did not. Instead, she redirected attention elsewhere, allowing rivalries to flare without her presence. Disorder, she had learned, was a shield when properly placed. Still, the sense of approaching reckoning sharpened. She dreamed of corridors narrowing, of doors closing one by one. The emperor grew restless. His visits resumed with urgency rather than comfort. He spoke of betrayal, of plots half seen. Livia recognized fear when it brushed against her skin. One night he asked what she would do if she were him. The question was a trap, whether intended or not. She answered carefully, framing her response as observation, not advice. Yet she felt the moment settle into memory, heavy and irreversible. To be asked was to be implicated. Callista's star burned brightly and fast. A whispered scandal reached the wrong ears, exaggerated by envy and carelessness. Livia did not start it, but she did not stop it either. In Rome, innocence did not require action, only timing. Callista withdrew from view, her brilliance dimmed by uncertainty. The court exhaled, already seeking the next disturbance. Livia felt no triumph, only the familiar ache of endurance. As winter approached, she understood that survival had changed her. She was no longer merely reacting, she was shaping outcomes through absence and presence alike. Yet she also sensed the limit of this power. Rome tolerated influence, not permanence. One day soon, it would ask her to leave the stage or be removed. The question that haunted her was simple and merciless. Would she choose the moment of her exit, or allow Rome to choose it for her? The end, when it came, arrived without ceremony. Rome rarely announced its conclusions. Livia sensed it first in the small omissions, a summons delayed, a message delivered by a lesser hand, a corridor that no longer opened at her approach. The emperor remained cordial, even warm, but the intensity had cooled into something distant and administrative. She understood then that she had reached the edge of usefulness, not because she had failed, but because she had endured. Longevity itself was suspicion. She prepared quietly. Assets were dispersed, favors called in gently rather than urgently. A villa outside the city was arranged under another name. She spoke less, listened more, allowed others to step forward into the light she vacated. When rumors surfaced of a new moral order, of reform and purification, she recognized the familiar rhythm of Rome cleansing itself symbolically. Women like her were never named in proclamations. They were erased through forgetting. On her final night in the city, she walked alone through a portico overlooking the Forum. The lamps below traced patterns she had once learned to read like omens. She felt no bitterness. Influence had given her knowledge, and knowledge had given her freedom few women possessed. She had not ruled, but she had shaped. In Rome, that was victory enough. At dawn, she left without farewell. The city continued, as it always did, absorbing her absence with practiced indifference. Somewhere, another woman was being noticed for her stillness, her restraint, her usefulness. Livia did not look back. She carried Rome within her now, not its cruelty, but its lesson. Desire was a force, but discretion endured longer. And history, written by men, would never speak her name, yet it would bear the quiet marks of her passing.